on the agenda is the approval of the regular minutes from September 12th, 2018.
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Matt.
Second.
Thank you, Vance. Any discussion on those minutes and corrections? I did not see any. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And next order is the approval of the non-public minutes from September 12th, 2018, which were in the review folder.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Matt, thank you, Karen. I think those are pretty straightforward. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And then the approval of return to public minutes from September 12th, 2018.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Communication, correspondence. I did not receive any since last meeting. Okay. So moving on to reports. Business Administrator, Debbie.
Yep, so the auditors came last week. Yeah. And then they did their, field work and everything. We should be getting a report, a preliminary report in another month or two, because there's a few loose ends they have to tie up. But everything went well. There were 4 auditors in for 2 days, and got through that. In your packets, I included the 2017-18 financial reports like I usually do at this time of year, because as we're finishing up the audit, we're also getting all the reports to the state. So at the last meeting, we had submitted the DOE 25 and the MS 25 to the Department of Ed and Revenue Department, Department of Revenue. So I put in your packets the summary. Each year we give you a summary of the general fund major revenues and expenses. So there's 2 pages of that, of all the major line items, how we usually sort it out for you. And I can go through each line if you want, or unless you have specific questions on that. I also included a food service fund summary, and there's definitely some trends that we're starting to see, and I can go through that. I included trust fund summary for the year ending 2017-18, and then where we are to date, 18-19. And then I also included the school district profile for 2016-17 and 2017-18, which is a report that comes out of the year-end reports. It just gives some good information, some good statistics about the district, the cost per pupil, different line items in the budget and the percentage to the whole budget. And I like to look at that to see if there are any trends, to see if everything is reported consistently to the state and how they like to see the reporting. So it's just a good check on where we are. So when we look at our revenues and our expenditures in the budget at the end of the year, any changes in revenues, any changes in the total appropriations or expenditures, we come up with our total unassigned fund balance. So that's the balance that we have left over after we look at our revenues and expenditures for the year. And any leftover, we have been retaining. There's a new retention law that we've gone over, well, it's probably 4 or 5 years now, I think. It's not that new. So the school districts can retain up to 2.5% of the upcoming year's budget. We've been trying to be consistent with, so the up to, that's the max. We've been trying to be consistent with what we put in there, so we've been trying to hold back. It's not that we put it into an account, we just retain that amount of money. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go back to the towns at this point, but it stays. So it's $100,000 that we've been trying to retain just to be consistent. And also, if there is an emergency during the year, we can use that money. We can go to the state and say, okay, this is what we've retained. It has to be for a specific emergency purpose. So we've kept that. So $147,968 will go back to the towns during the tax rate setting process, which is going on right now. So they take our budget for this coming year, they take our estimated revenues for this coming year, they then look at any monies coming back, and then they appropriate, based on our formula, our district formula, the amounts to the towns to collect through taxation. So, again, if you have any specific line item questions, I can go over those. I did want to point out in our food service fund, so we have our general fund, we have our special funds, which are our grant funds, so usually our grant funds, whatever we get from grants is what we can spend. Then we have our food service fund, and our food service fund usually is, it's any deficits that we might have in the food service fund, just because we don't usually make a profit in that fund, is funded by our general fund. So you'll see at the end of this year, we had a $37,000 need for funding from our general fund. That is up considerably. And there's quite a few things that we've been seeing. Number one, our enrollments are going down. So we have less. When I look at the actual lunch meals served over like the last 5 years, like back in 2013-14, we sold like 33,000 meals to students. Last year was 26,000. So that's about $7,000 meals less. Say at $3 a meal, because that's about what say we charge. That's like $22,000 of revenue that we've seen decreasing over the last 5 years in our meals. Our costs, some of it's variable, some of it's fixed, but the more fixed costs you have, even though your revenues are going down, your net income is going to go down because you have some. Our food service, the labor and food is probably our biggest expenses in the food service. Our labor, you basically have the same amount of labor because you need someone running that. So we have about 1.5 people in there. And that stayed consistent throughout the years. Food, yeah, that's it's in relation to what you're selling, but also you've seen the food costs go up over the years. So those are your two biggest expenses. The other thing we've seen the last couple of years is our enrollment's going down, our demographics are changing. Our free and reduced, which was going up, our percentages last year was a lot lower than it had been. So we had been creeping up to like 45%. Last year was probably 38% free and reduced.
Wow.
So we're seeing some changes all over the place. So that's the reason behind some of those numbers. So that's our food service fund. Trust funds, again, I just gave you where we ended the year 2017-18 and where we are today. We will be depositing up to the $100,000 broken down into different accounts, as you can see on that 2018-19 trust fund summary.
How long is that held? Is that just a hold for 1 year and then you can only hold up to 100,000?
That's that retained,
Right,
the 2.5%.
yeah,
Yeah, because that kind of starts out, that will roll again into our,
so it just rolls over.
yeah, it just rolls over. It doesn't physically go into an account.
Yeah.
Like the trust fund money goes into the trust funds.
Right.
That
Yep.
actually, we will move that from our general fund into the trust funds. And again, our school district profiles, some of the biggest things I've noted, we do see our cost per pupil continue to go up as our number of pupils is going down. Some of our costs are going down, but some are fixed and they're not gonna go down. Some of our building costs, we continue to see our buildings are getting older and our repair costs are going up in certain areas, so. So that's it in a nutshell, but again, if you have any specific questions, just let us know.
Yeah, I have a question. So
Yeah.
when I was looking through the district profiles and
Yeah.
looking at where the biggest increases were, well, not the big, none of them were astronomical. They were all like 0.2%,
Right,
0.3,
yeah.
but it adds up.
Yeah.
And just one of them that I saw was general administration. Is that the realization of filling the positions, the support positions?
General administration and business,
From
that,
year to year, from 2016, 2017 to 2000.
yeah, those accounts in there, that is the SAU,
Right,
expenditures, it could be, yeah, it's probably mainly differences in personnel there,
okay.
because that's your biggest cost. One thing actually you'll see on the, one line item that really stood out this year was advertising. You'll see
Yeah, I
that,
saw that
okay?
too. Yeah,
That,
was my
we
next
put all the
question.
district advertising in the SAU budget.
Okay,
Doesn't matter what it's for. Last year, we had a lot of positions that we were trying to fill,
yeah.
so we kept them in the newspaper longer. We actually have changed that now. We are actually using a free service to advertise, Indeed.com, if you've seen that.
Yep.
And we've actually had some good success with that, with more recent positions that we have advertised. So we're gonna try to change where we're advertising for positions, because that was really high last year. So that's some of that cost in that line item. And I know it's like 24,000, but that's a big,
Yeah. No,
that's
those are
also,
my
in
questions.
that line item is like your legal fees, audit fees, things like that.
In the general admin?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay. So that's also includes the
Yes,
legal?
yeah.
Okay.
and we saw some increases there too.
Okay. Those were the only questions I had.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else has any other question. I had a question about the food service, but you answered that as far as what the trends were.
Yeah,
Kind of the-
and you know, we've been working with Cafe Services on, because we identified some of those things last year as the year was going on, with especially the free and reduced, and, you know, they've been helping us. We try to get those forms out to people, but again, I think it's just been a combination of enrollments changing and different families coming in and out, you know, it's just,
Okay.
you know, that.
If anybody else has any questions, or if you think of any, we could revisit this later, but, thank you, Debbie.
Yep.
Superintendent's report, Judy.
Okay, first I'd like to introduce Jeanette Becto, for those who have not met her yet. She's the new administrative assistant.
Janet,
Yeah.
welcome.
Nice to meet you all. And Lisa Lavoie is a visitor, and she is the principal of the North Country Charters Academy.
Hello.
Here to visit. Let's see, the RFPs are in the packet. No, actually, I emailed them to you.
Email.
I emailed them, and they have gone out. And we did talk at the facilities committee, so the facilities committee can report on that information. Negotiations team will be beginning the negotiation sessions on September 27th. And October 5th, we do have a PD day where the entire staff will be attending a workshop. These types of professional development days, although we do have one every October, a full day, it's not every year that we take the staff to a particular school district or whatever. But North Country Educational Association had received a grant and was able to fund some of this monies for this project. So it ended up costing the district $1,500 for all staff to go, all
Wow.
teaching staff to go, so it was
As
something.
opposed to like $8,000 if we paid individually?
Exactly. So that ended up saving money. So on those types of incidences, we tend to have the whole staff go to that because it's part of the goal. It meets the goal of the district and meeting the needs of the students that are out there. I did put in a pamphlet explaining who the speaker was. She comes highly recommended. And so all of North Country is going to this. So like 700 staff members going
Wow.
from the entire North Country school district. So they're all going, will be at Berlin for the day. We did it a couple years ago with Wormelli. He was another speaker that came in, and we also sent the entire staff to that one too. So every once in a while, you know, when a grant comes up and the timing's good, we can put it in. We would do that. Let's see. Again, if anyone the rules and laws that the board would like to share, any upcoming or revised rules or laws that you would like to have changed or whatever, please bring forward, and then we can bring them to send them to the New Hampshire School Boards Association for the Delegates Assembly in January. And that information, I mean, that comes in I think every week we get a notice on the delegates assembly
Yeah.
and making sure if you have any ideas to send them in, so it's just a reminder. Let's see, I talked about the RFP. And again, we have the D policies. When we get to the D policies, I do have a few revisions. So the policy committee put the packet together and we reviewed the policies. However, there were a few that needed to be reviewed by Deb because they were all financial policies. We just wanted to check with her, so we did. And there were just a few tweaks I want to go over when we get to that part. And that's it.
All right, thanks, Judy. Principal support, Scott.
Thanks. Just a couple items. One is that over the 2 weekends ago, since our last meeting, we had our annual homecoming on Saturday that was very successful. It was a good, pretty large turnout for a very warm day on the field, so we were able to kind of get some good training from that, with all 4 teams participating. We also had our annual open house last Wednesday. Very well attended up here at the elementary school. We had parents have the opportunity to kind of walk through the elementary school building and talk with teachers and see classrooms and kind of have a tour of the building. That also happened as well down in the middle high school with dinner being served by Cafe Services. That was able to kind of provide that. So that was a very successful evening for both evenings. Later on this evening, I will be talking. I have some information for the board regarding some questions around scheduling and some of the grading makeup that we talked about at the last meeting. So I have that for the board to be a look at as well.
Okay. Next thing on the agenda is committee reports. I know that risk management met on Tuesday. I was not able to attend, and I think I got the notes the other day. It was a pretty short meeting. They discussed the fact that parents are picking up behind our building here, the elementary building, or dropping off, I should say, in the morning, rather than doing it out front. So I think they're addressing that because there's nobody on duty back there to. And then the one other item had to do with the welcome sign that was out in the hallway here. It had moved to a different location. A child tripped over it, skinned his knee. So I think they moved it back to the original location. I don't know if there are any other committees other than policy and facilities that have met since last meeting.
Facilities met tonight. We talked about a lot. Talked about the performance contract. Judy Deb sent that out, and we sent it to Johnson Control, obviously. Sent it to Siemens and Honeywell, and there's some type of periodical that contractors and services like that check, and we sent it to that, so it's published, and people can look at that as well. And we had some talk about, for that performance contract, just some discussion whether or not payoff was going to be, how many years it was going to be, and looking into now at this point, is it going to be worth it? But that's some more discussion to come. We talked about, elementary flooring project, continuing the flooring. I think the recommendation right now is to focus on this room this year. That might not be Nora flooring. I guess we're looking into a couple different possibilities of what the surface here would be, because the use is different than the hallways and classrooms. So more information on that to come. Mark discussed the oil tanks and what we need to do with those, and the price to take it out of the ground and replace it is pretty substantial, and we're looking at the possibility of taking it out, filling in, doing an above ground one with some protection. Might be a little more economical for us.
That's all dependent on what comes back from the
Right,
RFP.
from the RFP, right. We touched on the science lab, and we're kind of good to go with Stuart. He's going to present his latest findings and what he has for that. I believe it's at the next meeting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's going to do that for us at the next meeting. And then just a couple other things. We touched on the fields. Mark had given us some bids on a couple different bids. One on some biannual maintenance, one on resurfacing the infields, which we talked about, and another one on not resurfacing, but just some treatment for the outfields. And the two, infield outfield maybe being a warrant article this year, the maintenance piece just going into the budget. And then we talked about some other things we might want to do. I know for the last couple months we've talked about dugouts, front replacement of the front side possibly. But those are things we're gonna talk about in the upcoming meetings, so that's about it.
Okay.
Is this the appropriate time to ask some questions about this request for proposal?
It could hurt you that.
Is this the appropriate time to ask some questions about the request for proposal?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't see anywhere on there where it sort of identifies like what the core things that we're looking for them to do. And is there a spot where it specifically says, we are looking for you to do X, Y, Z, and you can do any other combination of things that helps you achieve that budget neutral wise, but we need these items done? Did I just miss it?
There was a general category, I think we had discussed not listing the specific things that Johnson Controls had identified.
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
Yeah, there was general categories at all of the areas that they looked at fitted. There was
I saw that, so
Yeah.
where it says, here are possibilities
Yes.
of things. But not like what, because there's some specific things that we need to have done, right? I mean, we need to upgrade boilers, tanks, things like that, like that's stuff that
Yeah, so
we-
heating systems and all that was in there.
Yeah, but I guess what's the point of having this all done if they're not gonna address the things that we need done?
When they go on the walkthrough, they will see those. I think that Mark will point out those specific areas in the walkthrough, like the windows and the heating systems and
Yeah.
all that.
So, my concern comes from, I don't think there's anyone here that's an expert in this type of stuff, but I have a friend of mine who does this type of stuff in New York City. I called her to talk about this request for proposals and what we're doing, and she said that there's things that you need to make sure that you're doing with these energy service contractors, or the performance contract companies, Johnson Controls, Siemens, Honeywell, all of those companies. And one of them is, what they're going to do is they're gonna give you a proposal for things that make sense financially for them, and not necessarily things that we need done. And if we're not getting done what we need done, and we're just getting a proposal of like, things that they can do to make some money on our building, that doesn't make sense to have them do it at all. And so, I think what we talked about was not limiting the scope of what they could do if they thought, they could put solar on the roof to help offset costs of some things that aren't gonna pay out, as well, then let them do that. But I don't think it makes sense to not identify things that we absolutely need to get done. And I think that at some point along the way, we're gonna need to say to them, here's a list of the things that absolutely need to get done, because what she said was one of the things that is usually not cost efficient is windows. And so if we're telling them that windows absolutely need to get done, then they're gonna wanna know that, because we're gonna get proposals back that don't include windows, because it's not a cost efficient, thing. Another thing is, establishing sort of a minimum of quality for what we're asking them to do. I mean, they can come in and say, okay, we'll replace your windows, but, 20 years from now, we're gonna have windows that need to be replaced because they put in crappy windows that just sort of had a shorter payback, based on, because these are businesses, they're trying to make a buck off of us and what they're doing here. And the other thing that was suggested, was that we really should have a third-party consultant, somebody with expertise to help us evaluate what these proposals are and what's going to be best for us. Because I don't think as a board, any of us have the expertise to look at all this stuff and say, okay, this is a better option than this. And the problem is, in general, that the proposals are gonna be apples and oranges, because we're letting them set the scope of work based on what makes sense financially. So we may be looking at a proposal from Johnson Controls that includes a bunch of stuff that the proposal from Honeywell doesn't. And what that does is it puts us in a position of having to look at two different things that are, that are completely different proposals, and maybe one's better than the other, but how are we to know that? I mean, I don't think there's anybody on board, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there's anyone on the board that has the type of specific knowledge that it would be necessary to make that determination. She suggested, and there's a nonprofit organization in Concord called the Jordan Institute that works with municipalities and that will do a consultation. I would propose engaging somebody with a little bit more knowledge than us about this stuff, because we're talking about either a significant financial contribution for the district or a significant commitment to a business, and, you know, we shouldn't be taking on a 20-year obligation without vetting it to the best extent possible. And I just don't feel like I'm well prepared and, to do that without expert, advice. And so you know, ideally, we would have somebody that doesn't have the sort of the financial interest in getting this contract, i.e. somebody not from Johnson Controls or somebody else come in and say, here's what you absolutely need to do, here's the things that need to be included in the scope of work, and then put it out to people so that they can say, okay, here's how we're gonna make this work for you in a budget neutral way, or that's not gonna be possible, you guys are gonna have to chip in some money, and then we can, if we think that that's the best way to do it, we can go to the voters and ask them for that money. But it seems like, in order for us to make any reasonable, assessment of what these people are proposing, we need somebody that knows what they're talking about to do that, or help us do that. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I don't know how to go about it, but I would propose looking into finding somebody that can help us do that. And I just mentioned the Jordan Institute because I know that my friend had worked there before she moved to New York, and that they do this type of consulting, and it's a nonprofit organization. I don't know what they, if anybody's familiar with it or anything, but they're out of Concord, New Hampshire. So somebody that that would be able to give us that expertise.
Yeah, I'm in agreement, I think, but I thought that there was a mechanism or something in here that stated that there was gonna be an evaluation team that was gonna review the proposals, and I don't know who's
Yeah.
on, I'm not comfortable looking at these proposals and knowing what they mean.
Yeah.
And I know that there are certain projects, like there's the HVAC system that we wanna include, there's the
Yeah.
oil tanks, there's the windows, there's X and X. But I think it would make sense to have somebody outside, or a team assembled that has knowledge of our systems within the building to help vet some of this.
But even that, I mean, I think if we're talking about, I mean, knowledge of the systems of the building, Mark knows what the building systems are, but
I'm
I
talking about
don't
engineering.
necessarily know that, like, does Mark have the knowledge to evaluate a contract that's gonna last for 20 years to determine whether or not that in the long run is gonna be financially in the best interest? It seems like it's a lot to put on any one person that's not specifically trained in that.
Yeah.
And then, you know, on top of that, you know, we're gonna be comparing apples to oranges, I think, when we put it out in a way that sort of leaves the door open for a lot of creativity. And I think that that's maybe the right thing to do for us, but we need a way to compare them fairly as well. And I did notice that there's some provisions in there that at least a portion of the savings money is gonna go to an outside person to sort of monitor to make sure that they're living up to their end of the bargain. It seemed like there was a provision in there for that, but that's sort of way down the line that they're saying, okay, we'll allow a third-party evaluator to make sure that, like, the provisions that saying it has to be reasonable and comfortable for the occupants of the building, that's being lived up to, and that they're maintaining the equipment in the buildings at appropriate standards. But I think that's like in phase 3 or phase 4 of this process, where we've already selected a contractor, done the scope of work, had them do the install, and then we're just checking up on them after that. I think we need to get a professional involved well in advance of that before we either commit to something for that long or outlay money to do a project, which is certainly needed, but it makes sense to do our due diligence, I think.
I agree.
So is that, can somebody contact Jordan Associates, or is this something that even, Stuart might have some idea about some of the workings of these systems, that we might see in the RFPs and?
Exactly, right, I agree, yeah, I think we should.
Because I agree, we're gonna go out and essentially, if it worked, they could come back and say, this wouldn't work, 20 years, you're not gonna get the saving, it's not gonna work.
Well,
But they can come back and we have to choose between 4 different contractors.
Right.
And I'm not an expert in any of that.
right. And there's a lot of criteria that were laid out at the end of in those appendices about like what we're gonna be evaluating. And beyond the fact that, I think few of us have the time to make that evaluation. There's dozens and dozens of criteria that we're supposed to be looking at for every single one, including like work they've done in the past and their reputation and like who's gonna be responsible to do that evaluation and do that assessment. And I mean, the facilities committee, I think it'd be a lot put on them, with making a determination of that nature.
I don't have the ability to ask those questions and know what to follow, you know, I mean, I wouldn't want that burden on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the primary issue, but
Yeah.
it's the organization I was referring to is the Jordan Institute, and it's a nonprofit organization here in New Hampshire that does that type of consulting, so it may be a good starting point, and if they don't,
Exactly.
you know, at least they're.
You said they specialize in municipalities and.
Yeah, they work with municipalities, and they work with building owners as well, just to sort of help them implement, these types of projects, implement sort of big, efficiency projects.
Right. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think that's a good next step to take before we get too deep into it.
Yeah, I think looking at the outline of dates in here, we're looking for proposals to be due on November 2nd. And I think that gives us a little bit of time if we can now start searching, you know, for a third party, you know, to give us that. And I think, you know, back to Jay's, the first few points about the specifics that we want in there, you know, they're not in there now, but I think that's something that can be covered in those first few parts of the deadline when they come and do the site visit.
Yeah.
That's
And
what,
then-
that's what it was.
And then they have questions that they're supposed to pose to us by, what is it, the 12th of October, and then we have to get answers back. So at that point, we'll know what vendors are bidding, and we can open that dialogue, and we'll let them know upfront that, you know, these are the things specifically, like I said, when they do the site visit with Mark. So I think, you know, we'll have that base covered, but I think that the second part of what Jay said is definitely important to, because, yeah, I don't think the seven of us want to say we're experts in that, in reviewing these
No.
proposals. So I think that's a good idea.
We'll do that.
Okay. Do we have anything else for facilities, or?
No, we talked, that was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
a bunch of little things, but there's a lot of stuff.
Right, okay.
I think the only thing I want to add in there is the October 24th meeting, we talked about going and visiting the science lab
Yes.
as a board. So Stuart will present on the 10th regarding the science lab, and then go and meet with Dave in the classroom and take a look at it. So we can get some more vision and.
This is like
Presentation.
what we're gonna do to the science lab.
Right.
Well, I think,
But they're doing
he
the
was gonna do a
presentation.
robotics
Right.
presentation with students also.
Yeah.
But it'll be in that classroom so you can
He
see.
does it every year, so that way.
And
Right.
he has a number of different things, including the 3D printer, the VEX robotics program, there's a couple different items.
And we just told
So
them
students
to
will be
be
there
there.
presenting.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is we'll have the presentation in the science lab at the beginning of the meeting and then come back here as you've done through the walkthrough, then come
Okay.
back here for the meeting.
Okay.
So,
So we'll move on to policy.
We did have a PD, professional development committee meeting yesterday. It was just an organizational, trying to figure out who's going to be on the committee and who's not going to be on the committee, so. And Matt, are you still the,
I was just gonna ask, was I supposed to be there?
I don't know.
I don't know if I was on that one this year.
Yeah, I don't know.
Are you there?
Yeah, I
I'll
definitely
look it
wasn't
up.
me.
I'll look it up and see. We were still getting ourselves organized,
Okay.
so
The
we
ones
did
that
this
meet
evening.
2:30, yeah, I know it's not me.
Yeah, it can't be,
I
no,
can't
yeah,
make it.
yeah. So, the next one we'll do at the end of October, and then for this particular year, it's quarterly. You know, it's not every month or whatever, because the only year or a couple of years it tends to be monthly is when we have to revise our professional development plan. And right now, at this point, the state has no new standards, of any sort for the professional development plan, so it is as is. So when it needs to be passed in to the state in 2020, we haven't had any, updates that we need to look at right now.
Kind of on that note, when we're talking about committees, I got an email from Jeanette yesterday about food service committee. We weren't 100% sure, because that was, Aaron was slotted for that. We weren't 100% sure if we filled that with someone else. If we went back to our minutes and,
I'll have to look to see who we put in there.
yeah,
No, we did.
that's probably
Did we
Aaron.
look? We did, but I didn't find anything for the.
That's like a spot.
It's usually after school, like when Jack is available or when Cafe Services. If Cafe Services is involved, they usually will put like when Jack is done in the kitchen for the day.
If we don't already have somebody doing it, I can fill in for it.
Brian?
Brian might be on
Oh,
that.
Brian, okay, yeah, he's not here, so.
Well, he's not here, so yeah, that's different.
I remember him volunteering. Okay, policy. So we have, as we said, quite a number of policies that were in our packet, a lot of in the Ds. I know you said you had some things that Debbie needed to go over. Before we get into that, I don't know if anybody else went through and found any changes or corrections that need to be made. I had one suggestion on the first policy, DN, the school properties disposal procedure. Just, we changed the language to mirror what the school board association said.
Yeah,
So it's got changed from by removal to the transfer station to by removal to the town dump.
We had that
We don't have a
conversation.
town dump.
That's what I
We did
said.
that.
We'll change that back to
Okay.
transfer station.
We did that,
Yeah.
that's the only thing.
And then in that next paragraph after number 4, there's just a typo where it says defray instead of defray costs.
Oh,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
oh.
Just out of curiosity, does this anticipate that it will be returned to the general fund of the school? And then if not used, then returned through the tax setting?
That's for sale of real estate you're talking about.
Yeah, just right.
Yeah,
So like, say we sell a piece of property, that money goes into the school's general fund, and then if it's left over at the end of the year, it goes, and is there like a provision to, say we sell a piece of property that's worth $100,000, does that go into the general fund for that year, and then it's just part of the,
because it would be revenue for that year.
yeah, and then it's just part of the expendable
Sale of fixed assets, yeah.
money in the budget,
Um,
like in the, cause it's the,
Unless the voters say that we want to spend that money from that sale on something specifically, otherwise, I don't know, we've never had that happen, but I would think like anything else, if we sold something, we've sold like a bus,
right,
right? That money just goes in as sale of fixed assets and typically will just go back into our general revenue for that year and get factored into the end of the year
okay.
balances.
Had a question on KCD with public gifts donations. The first edition, where it discusses voluntary contributions of supplies or minor items of personal property to be used in classrooms or school programs with an aggregate value over the school year of less than $250 are permitted without further approval or documentation. So if we have employees who are bringing in supplies for the classroom or things for the classroom at aggregate over $250, who's monitoring that? Does that create an auditing issue, or is it, I mean, if it's in a policy and there needs to be documentation, if somebody spends $500 of their own money on their own classroom, are we creating an auditing issue if we're not? You know, what's the procedure or process to monitor that? I don't know. No. Okay. I just didn't know if it would end up being heartburn on the auditing end of things. I mean, do we give the auditors lists of personal?
People have spent,
Teachers?
I mean, because.
Yeah, because teacher, I know generally teachers spend a lot of their own money in their own
Right,
classrooms.
and they can deduct some of that on their own.
And they can pay off their taxes or whatever. But what do we need to do on
But
our
we've
end? Is there
never-
anything? 'Cause it's in the policy. Okay.
No,
That's a good question.
I have a question about DKC.
I'll look into that, man.
Okay, that's it, yeah, it's not anything that's,
That's very good.
I just don't,
Which one, Jay?
DKC. So, it looks like we've added, otherwise inside of New England is approved.
Yeah,
And that might have been like a note that you took or something, because the point,
That-
we were saying basically that like,
Needs to take off.
all travel outside of New England is, it says all travel must, outside of New England must have prior written approval, and we were thinking that by including that, you're essentially saying travel inside of New England doesn't need it.
right, right.
And we wanted to make sure that all travel needs
Right,
approval,
right.
all travel that they're expecting reimbursement for.
That was left on by
Let's be
mistake.
clear. So I think it must just be like
It was
like-
not supposed to be on.
a note, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
So,
was definitely off. That was one of the ones that was off. That was a good one.
on these?
Yeah, though, I think those were the only
Oh, those were the ones.
two revisions that we had.
I think so. Are we all set on those then?
Hang on,
Or-
I just.
Okay. There's a few of them over there.
No, that was it, and I will check on KCD.
Yeah, I mean, we just may want to have an internal procedure or something
Yeah.
in place to cover us if
Yeah.
it ever comes back. Someone's looking for an audit because a teacher spent over $250 in their own money in the classroom.
Okay, those were the only
Seems silly.
revisions I had.
You know, you
Yeah,
never know.
so
So would you like us to move those then, with those
that would be
corrections?
great, yeah, with the revisions.
So,
Can you read them all out, Matt?
do you want me to?
Yeah.
No.
Just kidding.
That's first
I will make a motion to approve all policies in first reading as presented with corrections and changes to second reading.
Thank you, Matt. And second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Vance. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Business requiring board action. Do we have anything tonight, Judy? Nominations or recommendations?
No, it was just the, no.
Excellent.
Quickly move forward.
New business. Anybody on the board have anything fall into the category of new business before we move on to continuing?
Nora wrote some things on a napkin if you really want me to read those, yes.
Yeah.
Seesaw was all right there.
Oh. She should probably come and present to us.
Yeah. Just don't ask her to.
All right, continuing business. So we've got Scott's going to give us a little information here on scheduling, grading, such.
So I have two things for you. The first thing I'm handing out to you guys is the bell schedule that was included for this year. And I'll give you guys both these things and then we can, I can go through it. So that's item number one. Item number two is, these are, the second thing I'm handing out is regards to the grading piece. There's some questions regarding that that I want to address. Well, we can do either one first, doesn't really matter. However you'd like to, if there's one that you'd like to see more than the other.
You want, well, yeah, I'll just say, let's start with the grading one.
Okay.
Just because,
Yep, no problem. So these are two things, these are coming out of, the two things are charts that come out of the handbooks. The top one comes out of the 2016, 17 handbook. Do you guys want that? You guys want these? Yep. Okay. So the first one comes out of the 16-17 handbook. And that was a crossover of what it would look like for when they were looking at the grading out for, through the process of change over to competency-based education, to what the weights would be from moving left to right, what the percentage would be in a traditional sense, what the letter grade would be. There's a weighted and unweighted in regards to the level of class. And then there was a competency-based piece where there's numerical, letter grade, range, et cetera. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there. One of the things that we the issue that you have with that is if you look towards the bottom where you see on the far left where it says between 60 and 69, there was your D, D plus, D, and D minus. If you go over to the other piece of the competency piece, it says in the second to last column on the right that you be not yet competent. So you could conceivably have a student who would pass the class with a D, or D plus, or D minus, yet not be competent. And those two things are they're against each other. So you're having a kiddo going through the classwork, completing the classwork, and let's take off the plate for a second whether they did the classwork or not. So take the effort, that piece off or completion off. But if they were their level of performance would be on, a 60s kind of range, so you'd be passing, but you're still not competent for the course. So one of the adjustments we made, if you look at the bottom, which was in the 2017-18 and now this year, is that we aligned it so now you have 4 categories instead of those 5. And so your level 1, you're not yet competent, corresponds with that 0 to 69. So you're still kind of having those 4 buckets, where you're having that 90 to 100 being that 4, that distinguished, there's a bunch of different terms you can kind of put for that. You have the proficient, 80 to 89, B, however you want to talk about that, and C kind of approaching proficiency. So really one of the big things that we were trying to accomplish is have those kind of 4 buckets. And I don't really have a better term to kind of put it. It's just kind of how one of the things that we talked about as a staff, try to be able to kind of see it, is that how that would look. So no matter where your kid was, so you're not having that kind of, that argument between what the competency piece would look and your traditional grading would look. Okay. The other piece with it, in that, is also trying to provide some. I know there was a lot of work and some difficulties around the clarity of what is a 4, what is a 3, what is a 2. I know before there was some issues with report cards, prior to my arriving, where there was some change. What does the scale look like, especially when you talk about eligibility for athletics, extracurriculars? Does a student athlete need to be 2.0 or higher? Do they need to be? So there's, do they need to be at 2.5? What does that look like? So we try to bring some kind of clarity and do that. Sure, go right ahead.
Just sparked a question. What is athletically eligible now? Is it the 167 or the 2?
It would be this, for us, it is you need to be passing with that 70 or above, so it's that 1672, right in there. So it's right now for us, it's that 70 or above passing.
Okay, thank you.
So there's no such thing as a D.
No. No. And, and part of that reason, Jay, was looking at is just that in that first chart. So your D, so you're not competent in what you're talking about. And as a 60 as a minimum grade, so you're talking about a student only knowing, quote unquote, 60% of the material.
What effect do you think this is going to have on your graduation?
It hasn't. No.
I mean,
So we find, yes, no, that was last year and this year. 2017-18 was the first year that we did it last year. That was in last year's handbook. So one of the things that we saw, we do, our guidance department tracks as far as how we're doing as far as, pass, fail, what the rate is. Our policy, for example, for eligibility is that a student they have to pass, they can fail 1 class in a quarter, but for the next quarter, in order to remain eligible, they have to pass either all classes, and they cannot fail a class in consecutive quarters, if you follow me what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's there's a couple of different things with it. We monitor that. We also check them at interims, so which is a midway point in the quarter, so that's roughly every 4 or 5 weeks. And that's also kind of in conjunction with the NHIAA as far as what their regulatory body is recommending and says. So we give kids the opportunity to do the reassessment piece. So and that's kind of part of, when you look at how we kind of do our grading, it's a 90-10 split. So 90% of a student's grade is made up of summative assessments. So it's summative to talking your tests, your quizzes, your bigger projects, your depth of knowledge 3 and 4. With only 10% being formative, homework, classwork, participation in class discussion. But we give kids multiple opportunities to be able to kind of relearn, have a reteaching process. So if there's something I don't get the first time and my first quarter grades or second quarter grades aren't that great, I still have an opportunity to kind of bring that back up. So once I get to interims, if I've shown, Mr. Duguay that I'm doing well in his law class, then I can hopefully rejoin the polo team. You like that?
I like where your face is.
Yeah.
So, Scott,
Sure.
again, coming here as a parent of a child who
Sure.
faces special needs.
Yep.
The range from 0 to 69 is
It's huge. It is huge. It is huge. Yeah.
So, what, and I appreciate hearing that there are opportunities to relearn, but at some point, you know, 0 to 69, that's.
Oh, it's huge.
That's a giant range.
Yes.
And to say to a child who just didn't make it,
Mm-hmm,
you failed.
mm-hmm,
But you got 69%
yep,
correct.
right.
So thinking about the range of students here and their learning capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
how can we possibly say to the kids who are doing their absolute best,
Right.
you failed?
Right. So I think there's a couple of things with it. One, you're hitting upon a philosophical question that if you went to any single educational conference, that you could get a really good conversation going on with that really, really easily. You know, because the amount where they talk about is the amount of what that failure, that was 0 to 69 rate, or even 0 to 60 from the one before. It doesn't really go over half.
Yeah, but 69 feels.
And it's,
You're
you know,
just
just them. You know, I think there's a couple things I would say about it. One, that's where I put a lot of emphasis on the reteaching and the reassessment piece. That the idea being, and one of the things that we talked about, is that the idea being is that there's a thing about having kids, the fact that each kid is going to learn something at a different rate and intake it differently. If you put me if you put me in front of a piano and try to teach me the piano, I'm going to take a long time to read it. I may get there, but it's going to take me a while. Whereas some other kids, some of the younger, if you have some of our fifth graders, they'll get it like that. So, but it's the fact that how we get there. You know, some of the other piece that we talk about is that if you imagine, I can't really draw, but if you imagine a graph, and if you have a kid who stayed like this at 85 all year long, and this kid went from here to 70, who grew more?
Right.
You know? So I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm not disagreeing with you in any which way, shape, or form. With that, the point I make is that we're looking and put the emphasis on, one, and this will get into the schedule piece, is that building in time for kids to have that reassessment and re-teaching opportunities. We need to be able to have those chunks and increase our instructional time so kids can have those opportunities in which to do that and do it within the school day. You know?
As long as I sit on this board, I will be here speaking for every single child in this district.
Absolutely.
And I'm just thinking of all of those kids,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that are just close enough. And
Yeah.
not being able to make it.
You know, and the other thing that I'd bring up is that having taught in a couple different places where it's interesting that where you set the bar, where that cut point, because you have to put that cut somewhere. That I find it's really interesting in my experience, and I'm just speaking as for me, that my experience is that your percentages of, the kids know where the bar is, and they will get to that, the amount who's going to get to that bar, if you put it at 60, they'll get it at the 60. If they get to the 70, they'll get to 70. Some schools push it at 80. And, you know, and some schools will have, there's schools who, in the New Hampshire area, who look and say, you know what, proficiency is either the A or the B. And C, we're not going to count getting to it, because if you say gaining proficiency, well, then you can make the argument you're not there yet. So you have a little more ways to go. So, you know, and I hear what you're saying, but I think where you set the bar, and if you have the supports there for all kids, to quote what you're saying, if you have the supports there for all kids, you know, and make that an equal opportunity where they all have the opportunity to be able to do these, you'll find that kids have the supports to be able to get there. That's what I've had from my experience. If that answers your question.
Thank you.
So, I understand why you went to this new grading system, because it fits a little better with the kind of 1, 2, 3, 4,
Mhm.
kind of correlates to competency-based education.
Yep.
I'm definitely going to echo Karen's point that it creates this huge threshold where you need to get to pass. And just historically speaking, up until, I can't tell you the date, but probably 10, 12 years ago, the passing grade here was 70. I know it was when I was in school, it probably was when you
Okay.
were in school.
Sure.
You know, and we saw a number of people who were just below that. You know,
Right.
And when it
Right.
comes to extracurriculars,
Right.
it becomes a punishment,
Right.
essentially, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we changed that to a 60. And I think that it encompassed more people. You know, you have those, no matter how hard they try and how much extra they get. I mean, there's just certain students that have strengths and weaknesses in different
Right.
things, where it is a struggle to get to 7.
Right.
You know, so that's probably my biggest concern with this, and the fact that I know there was talk of this wanting to be changed by some people in the building 5 years ago, and it didn't get changed, and then it just kind of happened last year without any input from the board. I do have concern with that threshold being there, and I think to your point about being able to, you know, redo work, and,
Yeah.
you know, that all fits into the whole grand plan of competency-based education. And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, that things have changed. I don't see that consistency. We're seeing it on the front end, administration comes up with this.
Yep.
I haven't seen a complete buy-in from faculty.
Yeah.
When you know, on the high school level, you know, when my child comes home with a piece of paper that says, if your homework is a day late, you can redo it for 50, if it's 2 days late, it's a 0. Does not fit with competency-based education.
No.
Right?
Right.
Now, if we're throwing zeros out there like that,
Right.
like we do in the traditional system,
Right.
I don't think we should have a grading system that's going to punish that, if everybody's on board with that piece of it.
Okay, so there's a couple things that I want to talk about in kind of answering your question. The first thing I want to talk about is that in no means, when you talk about the grand umbrella of us as Lin-Wood and as a community for competency-based education, am I here talking to you as this is a finished product?
No, I know.
You know, no, and I'm saying it's just a general statement, because there are pieces, where there is there are pieces that we look at and try to kind of work around, and we're still trying to move in that direction. You know, there are things that we still need to work on to get better at, you know, regarding like what do we look like, because some of the conversations that, you know, we have, that teachers have, not just here, but in other schools in New Hampshire and across the area that are dealing with this, is that you get into, when you talk about the reassessment piece, then you get into some different, you get into individual scenarios. So you talk about, what if I have a kid, so if you and I are the 2 students in the classroom, and you are just doing everything you possibly can, and you're reteaching, and you're getting there, but it is taking you just everything you have. You're getting there, but it's taking a lot. As opposed to me, who I'm just doing this. I'm not putting much effort in at all. And at the very end, the last day, or I kind of, I wait to the very end, or I kind of put it in just enough. That's kind of a point where teachers kind of like, how do I differentiate between the two? If that makes some sense, if you're following what I'm saying. There's that effort kind of piece, and we kind of look at that. There are, and there's also the other piece we're looking at in the sense of when our kids leave, what do we need to do to have them, as far as specifically getting into college, what are certain things they need to still have? There was some time where the conversation was you should move away from valedictorian and salutatorian and class rank. Now it's kind of swung back a little bit and said, no, don't touch that. Keep that the way, that's something you still need. So I think there's in no way do I feel it's a finished product, and I hear what you're saying, and I see some of the things that you're talking about, but I also think that we're trying to put some items in place in order to support that, to work with that, to provide more opportunities.
Yeah, I think, for me, the big question is going to be what benefit is there to have the passing grade be 70 instead of 60? And you don't have to answer that right now. You kind of alluded to that. You felt like raising the bar, to shoot for the bar. I think, when you're talking about your traditionally stronger students or high achievers, 60, 70, 80, doesn't matter. They're going to hit the same thing.
Sure.
I just think that this opens up a little bit more of a door to punish those kids that struggle to get to that threshold.
Right. I think the other big difference that I would say between when you look at it from a competency standpoint and for what they would refer to as like a traditional standpoint is that, at least, and I'll use my own experience. For me, when I did not go to school here, I went to a school very similar to this, that when I took that test on whatever day it was, that was it. I had one shot at it. And if I didn't get it, too bad. We're moving on. I've had teachers before that either work with in previous areas, or had as a student. The quiz was on Wednesday, the test was on Friday, and if you didn't do well,
sorry, man, you should probably just do more. Only 1 second. So I think for me, the big difference is now, the shift in philosophy is you're looking at it saying, you may not have it, and this is what's really interesting, if you walk through our elementary school, one of the things they have is the idea that, and in our middle high school too, so you have some teachers starting to put up things about growth mindset. And one of the things they talk about is, I have not learned this thing yet. That word, that 3-letter word is huge. I have not been able to do this item yet, implying that I will. So I think that, that's the big difference, is giving kids multiple opportunities to learn whatever that item may be. Whereas if I was that student again, and there were subjects that I did not do well in, that I was that kid going, man, I would have loved it if it was at 60. The whole idea is being able to take multiple opportunities, multiple cracks at showing what I knew. Because there was, as a student, there was plenty of times that I didn't get it the first time. So I get what you're saying, but I think that's, to me, the crux of the big difference.
Before Vance speaks, I agree with you that, because I will speak from experience that the teachers are allowing the redos of the summative assessments.
Right.
Even if you say, oh, I got an 89 on this and I want to do better.
That's 90%.
You're right, they're allowed to go ahead and do that. And I think, maybe it's because it's now year 2 of you being here, year 3 of this, you came in and it looked like this, and we knew it wasn't going to look right away. The fact that the formatives are now counting for a lot less of that, because that's where your zeros are coming in.
Right.
The homework assignments.
Right.
So they're not hurting as bad when it's only 10%.
Right. And
But I just think that language coming home saying, this isn't done by now, it's a 0, it just
Right.
goes completely against the
Yeah, I think I would agree with the language piece.
Yeah.
Because if you do the math and say, like, if I absolutely crush every summative, but I don't do a single formative, I still get out of there with an A-.
I don't know, it would have been great, I would have been
I would have been all over that, Just saying. I would have been all over that.
So I guess my question is, you might have answered it. So you've talked a couple of times about having multiple cracks at it.
Yep.
To reassess, and in the old days, you didn't get it the first time.
I didn't say old days, that makes me old. I know, okay, but I'm not old, okay, but thank you, appreciate it.
So if you don't get it on that first crack, you're done. Are we, because Tony mentioned that maybe not all teachers are doing this the same way. Do we have all faculty members allowing kids to retake, reassess, retry?
Yeah, that's been a consistent theme. That was a theme that we had throughout our faculty, our meetings, going into this year, was that very clear one, there was a 90-10, split. I think where our struggles have been with the 90-10 piece of it is also getting the technology platform that we use to kind of agree with what we're looking to have, but also agreeing with what we're trying to have, but also being able to present it out to parents in a way that is very understandable.
So when you say 90-10,
Yes.
90%.
Yes, so a 90% of any student's grade is based on their summative assessments, your big performance items.
And those are ones that kids can have
Multiple opportunities out of it, right? Where 10% is just the formative stuff.
Okay.
Here's this classwork we did, here's this homework you did, here's whatever
So
that small
theoretically,
thing.
everyone's on the 90-10.
Everybody's on the 90-10.
Okay.
And I think that shows up now, now that Web to School is up, and you can see it
Yes.
from our end. You go in there and
Yes.
look at the grades, and you can see
Yeah,
clearly that formative is 10 and summative is 90. I think my only question there is just a little more definition of what falls in the summative. Well, and we know
Right.
summative is going to be your tests,
Right.
your projects.
right.
It's like where the quizzes fall. 'cause
Right.
sometimes
That,
you've got a
I would
class
take
where-
that, that's a summative, that
Right,
to me.
but I see them showing up under formative.
Right, and it's something, and what's tough about that, like that, and I understand what you're talking about, that gray, because sometimes, I know as a teacher, I would do this where I would say it's a quiz, where it's not homework, but I just want to get an idea where you're at.
Yeah.
And I'd rather I want to get to know where you're at now as opposed to wait to the test.
Right.
I was that guy who said, I'm not giving you a quiz, I'm not giving you a test, I'm giving you a quest, because it's somewhere in between. And if you had, if my students were standing here, they'd be like, yeah, he's that guy. But so I get what you're saying, so sometimes it's tough, but these are some of the kind of conversations and we have our faculty, just like a lot of faculties, have their own individual thought process of what it should look like, and I believe in this and I believe in that, and coming together to have some commonality.
Can I just add to that, Scott? When they're doing their summative assessments and they are able to retake an assessment, there is a process even within that process that the student needs to follow. And that is, if they need to reassess, then they have to also go back and go through the learning process again. So this reteaching, this relearning, and this review again before they can take. They just can't say, oh, I really did, I mean, some of it fails, obviously. So it's like, oh, I really didn't do good. Oh, I'm gonna just, I'll take it again tomorrow. I'll take it, you know, no, you can't. I mean, and when you look back, some of those kiddos are the ones that, you know, may not have done the practice of the homework, you know, and then you say, okay, so Johnny, it looks here that probably you didn't really do a great job on this, is because the learning didn't really happen because you kind of didn't practice, you know, with your homework. So let's do some practice sessions. Let's see if you understand it. Also, the formative assessment is informing the teacher where the child is in the learning process. So it could be a quiz, it could be, you know, any type of thing, it could be a unit assessment. But it enables the teacher to see if the child is understanding the concept and if they can transfer it into their own mind. So if that happens, then, you know, then the teacher can move on. If that doesn't happen, you can have immediate reteaching. You don't have to wait till you get done to the whole unit before you go back and reteach. So, I mean, there's teaching, there's reteaching, that's happening all the time, you know, throughout the process.
So when you say, oh, were you done, sorry?
I was going to go to competency, so go ahead.
So when you say, like, if they get a bad grade, they maybe don't necessarily have the opportunity to take it right away the next day.
No.
But on the flip side, is there a limit to, it's been X amount of days now, you can't, or
Well, I
students have
think,
the option to
yeah.
kind of do it the way they need to?
And this is part of it, and this kind of dovetails with, you know, when I said to Karen earlier, is that you have, you know, you want to strike a big conversation in an ed conference. That's another great question to ask. One, I think we have a lot of teachers who are doing this, where you may, for lack of a better term, if you want to reassess on something,
Yeah.
that you may have some kind of requirements that you need to meet in order to kind of get your ticket into the theater.
But otherwise, there's not a limit to.
No, I mean, the only thing that we
other than
run,
marking term.
yeah, and that's what we run into,
Yes.
is, to be honest, is the marking term, because at some point, you as parents want to say, where's my kid at? And that's a fair question. And so one of the things that we kind of look at is, we have, you know, in talking with our guidance folks, is like still giving them the opportunity to reassess that, but it's now, especially when you get out of the marking term, there's some extra paperwork that we kind of have to fill out and do, because now you've already gotten that piece of paper coming home saying, you know, Scott's at a, whatever it may be, 80, whatever. So now I need to come back and change that. And so that's kind of another layer that's added.
So I guess my next question would be, because Karen had mentioned, wow, that 69 is so close. If the
Yeah.
kid gets the 69 on the marking period,
Mhm.
and then later on, marking period 2,
Yep.
they do what they need to get a shot at it.
Yep.
Can they replace term 1?
Yes.
They can.
Yes, we've done that.
Okay.
We've kind of, I mean, if
So as long
there's,
as they're going through the, not to interrupt, as
No,
long as they do the steps and they communicate with the teacher,
correct,
the kid can, as long as it's summative, they can
Correct.
really work towards
Right.
anything.
and don't get me
Just
wrong,
add one other part to that too.
Sure.
Because this is, kind of goes on something Tony said. Athletically eligible or uneligible students,
okay,
I think you probably know where I'm going with this, they get that first quarter report card in
Mhm.
November, 69, not passing, ineligible, can't play a sport,
mhm,
until January report card. Can they,
No, they can't turn it.
no, they can't, 'cause if what you're saying is true, that theoretically 2 or 3 weeks later, they can fix that and now they're eligible.
right.
Okay. I didn't know that.
And I think one of the things that we look at, you know, and kind of where we kind of run into is that when you look at, it's interesting when you talk about the eligibility, and this is again more for high school, the requirements that you look in those NHIA bylaws sometimes don't always jive cleanly with what you're trying to do, because they're very much, it's interesting, because they have to be very vague
Because so many
For-
schools have different.
in different things, and, right, and so they're very much, I mean, and, you know, and they're on Carnegie units, you know, which is like, you know, and if you look at their requirements, a student athlete for them only has to be passing half their classes.
Right.
And some schools say half your classes. So, I mean, ours is significantly higher than that, which, you know, I tell kids, like, there's a reason why it's student athlete. The student comes first. So I think there's that piece, but yeah, we try to, if there's anything that we can kind of give them that multiple opportunity. I mean, I'm very kind of sympathetic to what you're talking about. So I think giving them the multiple, because in the end, what do we all want? We want them to be able to, you know, learn the material that we're talking about and have them be successful and be able to move on. I mean, really.
So just a quick question. So since this is such a big change, you know, what support, and I'm sure there is, you know, is in place for the teachers and the students so that everyone's still kind of going forward, even though we have people going back, you know, and relearning. So is it the guidance department? Like, are there, you know, tutors available? Like, what's kind of the process?
So I want to thank you for that segue. So if you turn over to the schedule. What a great segue. Thanks. One of the things that we put in for supports, if you look at, and we actually had this today. So on the, and you don't have to look at the bottom half, I mean, unless you really want to look at what the early dismissal schedule will look like. There is a rumor that the principal has let kids out early and have delays. So that's there if you want to look at that, but that's not. There is a rumor that the principal does have 2-hour delays.
Oh.
In wintertime, it snows.
And straight up cancel school.
Straight up, yeah, okay. Good luck to you with that. So here's the thing I will draw your attention to. So the way our schedule is looking is that we have on Monday, Thursday, Friday is the traditional, I've actually learned this term from a different school in the area where they refer to it as the traditional 7-period waterfall schedule. I didn't know that was called the waterfall schedule, but it's a traditional 7-period day. Each class is 48 minutes. There is a lunch and advisory, so if the middle school, for example, middle school eats lunch in that first slot, while they're doing that, there is a short 23-minute advisory time for high school students, and vice versa in the next slot.
What's that? What is advisory?
It's basically their homeroom. It's a homeroom, they're a homeroom teacher, so they're part of the advisory, and this comes out of our work with NEASC and the accreditation piece that they asked for, what they refer to as an advisory program. The main goal of an advisory program is to give every single kid within your school a person that you know that they can kind of connect with. So you can have somebody, so you have some kind of issue to kind of oversee you. So you as the student can find, you know, if you're my advisory teacher and I'm your student, I come to Mr. Duguay's advisory every single day, and you're the one kind of checking in on me saying, hey, Scott, what do your grades look like for da-da-da-da-da-da? What is it that you have any other issues that may have come up, or you know, what's going on with this, or just that person that you can kind of have that, and maybe even have some of the different conversations.
And that's the homeroom person?
Yeah, it's the same person. You know, for example, I'll give you another example. Like last year, we had multiple speakers who came through our ADAPT program, and also another good one will be when we had Judge Broderick came in. A lot of our debriefing time came through advisory, where we have advisors giving script and say, okay, what are some things you heard? What are some of the things that were meaningful to you? What did this mean? What does this look like? Et cetera, et cetera.
So it's not really a teaching period, not really a study hall.
Exactly.
Sort of a check-in.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a hybrid of a lot of those different things. That answer your question, Jay?
Yeah, I just.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So the other piece, if you look, we have, so on those Tuesdays and Wednesdays, those are 90-minute periods of time. On Tuesday, they meet periods 1, 3, 5, and 7, as far as their classwork. And then on Wednesday, it's 2, 4, 6. And then they have what we refer to as a focused learning time. And for focused learning time in the middle high school, is that every class, every teacher is in that same bucket. Everybody has that focused learning time. So all teachers are available for that support for whatever she may be. So the answer, kind of go back to your question, Karen, is that you said what other supports are you putting in for place, is that's a big one right now. We're building in some of that time during the day so kids can have that reteaching, relearning opportunity. You know, one of the things like for today, you had teachers kind of emailing it, you know, if you have Scott Courier and Mark Hood in class today, please send them to the Mr. Webster's room because they need to retake a biology exam. Whatever it may be. Sorry, Mark. Okay, you know. So that's kind of one of the things that you probably did better than me, so. But that's kind of how you're starting to have that kind of conversation, what that looks like. The other piece of it with that is it's increasing of instructional time. When you look at when you count up the amount of minutes, last year's we had a much larger advisory time that we found it was too much. Advisory was actually a period and there was some time around opposite of lunch and kind of became too much of what we're looking at. It was every single day. So classes last year were 46 minutes and all year long, 7-period day. This year, with between the 90 minutes and each class being 48, you end up at the end of the year, your one class would have the equivalent of about 138 more minutes, or 2 days. So you'd have, by the end of our school year, the amount of instructional minutes we put in, you basically kind of gain 3 days, 2 block days, and 1 7-period day. You know, and so I think for us is increasing and kind of rearranging our time. So for example, when we have some of our items coming up, for example, poetry out loud. It's a big item that we do every year. We have the Rotary speeches that we do every year. Those are items that we can place sometimes strategically, either with that focused learning time, so we're not losing the instructional time. But I think the other piece is that, you know, kind of doing that math this morning as far as what that, you know, to kind of check myself, that the increase in instructional time over the course of the year is a big benefit for us.
So am I to understand that Wednesdays from 1 to 2:30, so unstructured time?
Not unstructured.
Not unstructured, I mean, but not.
It's not
designated to a particular class.
You are, so for during that time, you are designated to your advisor. Your advisories, that's where kind of that home is. But they, from there, would then kind of say, okay, you may have an appointment to meet with Mr. Manning regarding this item.
That's the time that you would go, you know, kind of go
Caught up, you need to, there's you know, you're studying for something, you're caught up for something. It's more than just, it's not just study hall. Study hall is kind of passive, where this would be much more like, I need you to go here. This teacher has requested your presence. You know, and they're all, and it makes the ease of that is that everybody's on that same block of time. So if it's, you know, I know, and you have like, if it's like a, you know, traditional kind of study hall thing, like, well, I got this work for Mr. You know, Pickering's, you know, phys ed class, but I can't talk to him. He's in class right now. You know, and so I think that it's the assigning of, you know, kind of this is where you're going and what you're going to be doing. And it's raining really hard outside.
My raincoat's in the car.
What's that?
My raincoat's in the car.
Just gonna run real fast.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Yeah, I had some questions that I brought up, you know, concerns last meeting about the schedule. And we don't have all the information here that are requested. I'd ask for the master schedule.
You know, I just noted that I didn't.
Yeah,
Yep, we can provide that.
And I think we're probably past the ad drop period now,
Yeah.
so we can get accurate numbers on that, because I just think it's worth taking a closer look at, because my concern, as I said 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
is that I don't disagree with this, because if it's used efficiently, it's a good system.
Right.
I worry about inefficiencies that might be there, or as far as
Sure.
efficient use of time for teachers. Like I said, if you look at it, if somebody has, you know, a plan period 3, and they've got a study hall period 5, they're now looking at a 3-hour block.
So I'm glad.
Student.
Yeah, do you mind if I?
Sure.
Right. So I'm glad you bring that up, and for this very reason, because that's something that we looked at and considered kind of going in. And also for, I mean, I'll get into this, the contractual reasons that when you look at, for me as the administrator, looking at having to make sure regarding the CBA, that I have to provide at least a 45-minute chunk of time every day for the middle high school teachers. So for us, the schedule works out, and like, you know, can provide you with the master schedule at the next meeting. I don't have a problem with that. is that your study hall, so if you're teaching, let's say, imagine your class load, if you have a study hall, it would be, if your study hall's on an even day, then your plan would be on an odd. So you don't have that being on the same time. Because, so you and I might be teaching together, and this is kind of a little thing we had to kind of work out. So you and I may share a study hall. So me and you can, just the size of our, our teaching staff, you and I both have study hall at, first period. Just make up a number. So during first period, we're fine for the Monday, Thursday, Friday. But on that Tuesday, you get them for the first 45, and I get them for the second 45. And again, now you're teaching for the rest of the day. You're teaching 3-5-7 all the way straight through. So there's the other end of it. But then on the other day, you still get that plan. You still get the other piece of the plan and your classes and FLT and what have you. So those are opposite.
Was your concern more staff utilization or like just student?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think I'm hearing from students that, some of these hour-and-a-half blocks, there's not enough to do, or there's, and I think looking at this, the FLT thing, I mean, it's great in concept, and I'm sure there's a number of students utilizing it. But I also, I jokingly call it CBT, cell phone time. Because I bet if we ask Mr. Aldridge, what our bandwidth usage looks like between 1 and 2:30 on Wednesdays, it spikes. And that's an issue that we dealt with, was that last year? Year before, 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
And that's just a concern, when 1 o'clock hits and, Johnny's not gonna do his work and he's just gonna sit there and watch Netflix, well, are we stopping it?
No, I understand what you're saying,
And, I mean, that's just a small potential flaw in this.
Yep.
But yeah, to Jay's point, yeah, it's I've heard from students that it could be more efficient from their experience. But I think people are utilizing it. Kids are utilizing it. And I think there's probably some holes that we're going to see in the staffing part of it.
Right.
Potentially. I mean, we have that challenge regardless because of our enrollment.
Correct.
Where people are going to have small classes.
Correct.
But if, it's, you look at, I don't even know, just throwing a number out of a hat. It's like, okay, you've got this plan period for an hour and a half, and then your next class has 3 students for an hour and a half.
Right. And then the problems with that scenario, what you're talking about, is like that the 3 students in the class you're going to have, regardless of what your schedule is.
We can't control that.
Right.
We've been through this years past where we've had classes with 0 people in them.
Right.
But we have to offer the classes to keep our certification.
Right. No, I totally understand that.
And when it comes to electives, we can't ask kids to please take this so we have more kids in it.
Right. I mean, and there is, and it's kind of interesting that when you get, especially in the beginning of the year, what kids think they need, and kind of that's where the counseling comes in a big part. And it's like, hey, maybe instead of this, take a look at, kind of pushing yourself here or what have you. I know from, as far as the FLT time, where some of the classes, like our science classes are really, I know Mrs. Parent and Mr. Webster would talk about, that's for them, just the way the schedule worked out, for example, for Mrs. Parent, is like her AP, one of her AP classes backs up into FLT. So she's ecstatic, so her kids are getting a potentially 3-hour chunk of time where they could work on something. So, and the first day that we went through it, there were students who came to me, and I had one student who walked by me in the hallway where I like to hang out, and he looked at me in first period, he's like, I have English for, nothing against English, I have English for 90 minutes. Oh my, and he 24 hours later, he's standing in the exact same spot, talking to the exact same person, saying, oh my goodness, I have small engines for 90 minutes. And the kid was stoked. So I hear what you're saying. It's not perfect. It's still that work and kind of make kind of the work in progress of it. But the thing I would point out is there's some positive I think that we can really pull out of it too. Like that kid going, hey, if he can look forward to the 90 minutes of messing around with an engine, he'll give me the 90 minutes of learning American literature.
That's the point that I was going to say too, is that, teachers and students alike are always going to find things that they don't like about their schedule and things that they, no matter what our schedule looks like, kids are going to say, they're going to find things they don't like. And if a kid is going to slack off or a teacher is going to slack off,
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's only been a month.
Right.
You know, and I said at the last meeting, it'd be great, as you said, when you set this up, you survey the teachers to find out. I think as we get further into the school year, maybe not even up to first quarter, get a half year into it, up to first semester,
Let's do it again.
survey the students and see how they feel about it.
Sure.
You know, the pluses and minuses, and survey the teachers as well.
Yeah.
And see if it's really working out
Right.
for all of them.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point.
The other piece of that, the periods where you have that long extended period of time, is in the competency-based education, that gives a student enough time or more time to work on project-based, projects that are gonna be done for their assessment. Some of the kids are doing project-based assessments, and a lot of them can't do it at home. They don't have the materials, they don't have the support or whatever, and that's when they can go to that particular teacher and work on any actual project that they're invested in, and they have that time, as well as the reteaching and the relearning.
And on that point too, I think that it's important to teach kids self-discipline. I mean, most schools are moving towards online courses where you are the person that's making your schedule. You're the one that's holding yourself accountable. You don't have a teacher there saying, this is due today, this is due tomorrow. If it doesn't come in, you have a zero. If you have this chunk of time where you can either use it productively or not, it's better to learn it at 16 when you're in high school, getting a C on something, rather than in college taking an online class and realizing, oh wait, I don't know how to budget my time. And that goes for college as well as, work. A lot of times at work, you are in charge of your schedule, and if you can't manage it, you're not going to meet what you're supposed to do. So learning that in high school isn't necessarily a bad thing.
This will all be clearer when we see the big spreadsheet schedule. Right? Sometimes it's kind of after bring around. Not the stuff you have.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I don't think that's gonna show us results or impacts, that's just gonna show us numbers.
Numbers.
So.
Right.
it's going to show you numbers.
We look at it every year,
See
we
who's
see
teaching.
challenges
Right.
every year, but it's always, I think it's always a good exercise to look through it. But that's not gonna show any impact that any schedule changes had on learning or.
Yeah, not-
Not, that'll.
So I've got the consent of the room. I'm gonna spin back to the grading thing real quick. And the
Ready.
question I have is, and I don't know if you can, well, you should be able to answer this.
I hope so. You're actually the second person to say it to me this week.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm going to have to ask you a question, but you probably can't answer it. You know? Okay, thank you.
So when we're talking about, the redoing of work, and Judy
Yep.
expounded upon that with, the fact of, meeting with a teacher and redoing your formatives before beginning with to a summative.
Yep.
Is there, and I'll, before I ask the question, because
Sure.
I don't want to set you up, is that I've seen things that contradict that.
Yes.
Right? So is there a general philosophy, being handed down through administration of this is how this should be approached, or is there more autonomy given to the teachers to kind of go about that process a little differently?
I'm going to answer it. That's been a process. That's my best way to kind of answer to you. So I understand where you're coming from, and I understand I recognize what you're talking about. Yes, there's a process, and I think that I very strongly hold on the idea of, and just the way for me as an educator, that I feel that kids should have those multiple opportunities to be able to show competence, to be able to show mastery of whatever it is that they're learning. I have, there is that, for as much as, and this is some of the argument that sometimes we'll have, is that, we talk about, you have this multiple opportunities, but there is that ultimate deadline of you are now in your senior year and graduation's coming. If we really want to get into it, at some point, there's that deadline of, do I hand you a piece of paper or not?
Right.
And so I think that, for that process that we're going through right now is kind of working out those kinks of getting everybody to have that very similar and same language of what we're talking about, how that goes about. Because having those kind of conversations, because there are differences where folks say, well, what about this? Or what about this over here? And from their own content areas. And some, the points are, 99% of the time, they're valid points. But that's a process that we're going through, and I've had parents, have those conversations with me saying, well, I'm looking at this looks a little bit different than the grander. So the best thing that I try to do and I work on is keeping my message very, very consistent and say, this is what we're looking at, and kind of reinforcing that every single year, and reinforcing it in how things we set up, for example, how we set up Web to School. For example, for teachers this year, Web to School was set up for them. It was 90-10 for everybody's grade book, there you are. So you're taking away a little bit of that, that lack of a better term, some of that wiggle
I
room.
mean, that definitely looks better than it has in years past.
Yeah, I mean, and we've,
Uniformity there.
yeah, and we have, as I know for me working, for us working in the administrative team and guidance, we've struggled with kind of getting the technology piece to jive. And that's not always been easy. So I think, well, part of the steps that we took is to kind of get that uniformity. That was a big step we took this year, was kind of saying, here are what the grade books are going to look like for all. And now going back, so now it's the language piece. It's what is individual, and that comes through the evaluation process, that comes through observations, that comes through all of that, and those professional conversations. Does that answer you? Okay.
So maybe I misheard you.
Okay.
I feel like maybe Tony and I asked similar questions with different answers.
Okay, what's your question?
The summative pieces, which are 90%.
Yep.
Kids should have the opportunity to retain those.
Yep.
I thought Tony might have just asked.
So what, and you correct me if I'm wrong with your question, is that for what I heard from your question was that sometime, and I think it's more some of the formative piece, that there is some discrepancy from, individuals in the building regarding, what that looks like. I'm thinking more.
I think that it's probably the general case that they can redo those summatives, but it's the process that leads to them redoing that summative.
Yes.
Could vary from teacher to teacher.
Yes.
So they might say,
Yes.
here, just redo the ones you got
That's,
wrong.
I guess that's.
Right.
Or someone might say, redo the formative.
Right.
Everyone probably needs their own freedom to kind of
Right.
manage their classroom, but no kid's gonna be told, no, you can't.
Right.
Do this summer.
Right. And I think that the argument has also been made that, and I've heard this argument from, in a variety of different ways, and I say argument in the sense of it's dialogue, it's discussion, it's not, something. But I think it's, if a kid goes on to, when they leave here, if I look at the 6 of you sitting in front of me, if all 6 of you, if I was your employee individually, each one of you as an employer, as a boss, would probably work with me differently.
Yep.
Like I would have to interact with each one of you differently. Same thing if they're going off to college or tech school or whatever, the workforce, armed forces, whatever it may be. Learning, and Jasmine, you kind of touched upon this a little bit, is kind of learning some of those kind of pieces. So, and Tony, to kind of go back to what you're talking about, you said like that process to get from formative to get into that reassessment piece, that it may look different, and I think us as a group is trying to work towards having it have some uniformity, but also talking about like the reality is there's going to be some differences when they get out of here. That the way that I may work for Matt may look different than Jasmine or Karen. That's part of it. I don't know if that answers your question, thanks. I rambled on.
I just want to add one more thing that when Tony was saying about the summative assessments, you could very well have summative assessments where certain components of the assessment where the child did not do well in would be the only thing that was retaught and relearned and then reassessed. Okay, it wouldn't have to say, okay, so let's say, and we do that for the summer program. So the summer program, if you have, high school students, especially high school students, when they're coming back for summer school, in let's say algebra, and they left out they just didn't do well in one component area of algebra, you're not going to give them the whole algebra over again when they had very high scores in all of it. Just come in for this component of the algebra, or geometry, or whatever it may be, and reteach and relearn, and that whole summer program is based on that philosophy, so that it tracks it that way. But that's just to give you an example.
You want the time?
Okay, let's make sure I'm all good.
Yeah. The only other thing I'm going to maybe plant the seed a little bit for future conversation, because it says here, the scholar's going to talk about scheduling, grading system, and competency-based education. I think I'd like to have maybe a little larger discussion about the competency-based education at a later time. Because it's ever changing, right? It looked a certain way when Scott got here, and we were kind of, as every school does with CBE, it's like you don't know what you're doing. you're kind of trying to figure it out. So then you came in and it was like, well, wait a minute, you guys are maybe stepping in the wrong direction, let's back this up a little bit. I think that was kind of the approach at first.
It was, and the other thing that's tough about it is if you go, that CBE piece also varies high school to high school.
Right.
Like, you know, I have colleagues that work at other high schools where they haven't even started, and they should have years ago. And they're like, yeah, we probably should get around to it. Then we have some who are, you know, way farther into it, where it's everything's 4, 3, 2, 1, and they're like, okay, now that brings us other challenges. So, yeah, I mean, I'd love to have that larger conversation.
Yeah, and I think my take on it was, just to give you a little background, was when the subject of CB first came up, I was like, I don't know how well this is gonna work. It's gonna be a huge burden on the teachers to try to give individualized instruction. And then, I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, I went to a conference with Judy, and we went down and had a presentation on it. And it sounds like the best thing possible, because it can bring the lower students up to a higher level. It can bring the students that are kind of in the middle to achieve a little bit more, you know, when done right. You know, I think, but that one caveat to that was I always felt there needed to be 100% buy-in from everybody who's presenting it. And I think that, and it's gonna take time, and you use the word process.
Yep.
And, you know, we need to trust the process.
Yeah.
But I feel like that, yeah. But I think it would be a little more reassuring that we know that everybody's buying into getting on board with the process, even if it's taking them, you know, a little bit longer, because they're,
Just like our kids.
yeah, you know, you're used to doing something for 20 years. You know, because it's, you know, I don't want to see teachers kind of railing against it and continuing to put, you know, round pegs in square holes. You know, it's like, I want to do things, this is the way I've always graded, and I'm going to manipulate it so it kind of looks like they want it to look in the CBE thing. I just hope that the process continues to go in the right direction. But I think it would be great to, like I said, not spend too much time on it, to have more time to prepare, you know, as the board has changed and not been involved in the whole process, to kind of know where we started, where we're going.
And that CBE process, at least in this district, that was started before I showed up.
Right, it was piloted in the middle school, they ran with it for a year, and then
Yep, and
the year
that's-
before you got here, we kind of
It's a
integrated.
process. I mean, you
Yeah.
still have districts, we just got another email from one of the districts and saying, okay, so do you use numbers 1 through 4? Do you, you know, and they're all trying different things, many different responses. We tried 1 through 4, it didn't work. You know, we still have valedictorian, salutatorian, you know, that's still working, you know, colleges are still asking for that, you know, for a variety of reasons. So it's all over the state, but everyone is moving in that direction, so it's interesting.
All right, and the other thing on continuing business was the RFP for energy efficiency projects. We talked about that under facilities. So moving on, Mrs. Smith. Hello.
Hello. I just have 2 things. One is from Chad Steen, our new ADAPT person, and he wanted you to know that the student assistant coordinator organized a trip of 12 students to the Up Granite Youth Conference this past Friday at the Mountain View Grand Resort in Whitefield. The conference was presented by the North Country Health Consortium. The Up Conference focused on providing student substance abuse prevention awareness and alternative to use activities, as well as giving them an introduction to standard conference expectations. Dory Whedon had good news. She is excited to tell you that Lincoln Green, under the AHEAD Corporation, is our newest community partner in the ELO program. They currently have 10 community partners that they work with, and the list continues to grow. And thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Community? Nothing? Thank you. So we're going to have a non-public